Welcome to the third video in the series for this week. In this video is when we finally get to start to do some really cool stuff. We are going to be taking a look at forms. Now, just a quick recap. The HTML form, which you should have covered in 375, and it's also described in the book, and if you have any other questions, please go out to W3 Schools, but this is just a basic HTML form. So we start out where we open up our form by using the form tag, and in it we include action. We put in what that action is, and it goes out to some PHP file. And up until now, that's always just kind of been there and has been part of the exercises that we've done in, like, say, ICT 375. Now we're going to start working with what that welcome.php is in the case of this little example. And we choose the method. And your method is either post or get. From here on out, the rest of the semester, you're probably going to be using post. I would guarantee about 99 to 95% of the time, you will be using method equals post. Then after that, you put in your fields, whether they be radio boxes, check boxes, text forms, whatever the case may be. And in this example, it's just a name text box. So it's got a little label of the word name. The input type is text, meaning that we can type in exactly that is text in here. Now this next field is particularly important when it comes to working with our PHP, is the name element or attribute here. In this case, name equals name. What that means is we're trying to name this something that we will understand. So for example, if we made this a first name and last name field, we would call this one probably like first underscore name or first dash name. And then the next one would be like last underscore name. But in this case, it's just name. And then our second input field is email. And we're just simply going to be using the type equals text here. In HTML5, we can actually do type equals email, and if you so choose, you can go right ahead and do that. The only warning is it does not necessarily work on all browser types. Then we have name equals email, because again, this is telling us what exactly is going to be in this field, and you'll see in a moment how this gets used. And the last is input type submit, and that's what's going to put our button there. And then we close up our form. When we're finished, we get something that looks like this. There's no styling, there's no nothing to make it pretty, but it's a working form. The downside is, though, we can't do anything with it. HTML only takes us so far, and CSS also only takes us so far, but until we introduce PHP, we can't really do anything with this form. That's when PHP form handling comes in, and this is where all the magic happens. Remember, in the HTML file, is we called up this file called welcome.php. That is our form handling page. And what we can do with that kind of page is really whatever we code on it, but a number of the types of things that happen frequently is it can display a confirmation page saying, hey, thank you for filling out this form. Somebody will be getting back to you shortly, that kind of thing. It could generate an automatic email to the person who filled out the form that, again, is just confirming, hey, we got this form. Thank you for filling it out. Here's the information that you provided for us. When working with databases, forms can allow us to add new information to a database, edit what's already there to make changes, or remove elements that are existing on our database. Another, it's kind of along the lines of the first couple of points, but it can confirm login credentials. And really what it's doing is that it would go out to a database and verify that the username exists and that the password exists. And if they do, and there's that if statement that we've talked about earlier in the videos, is if they meet, then it would execute a certain bunch of code. If not, that's when you see error messages like we've probably all seen, which is the username and password, that one or the other cannot be found. But this is what PHP form handling allows us to do. In order to do this, we utilize a couple of things that are referred to as PHP Superglobals. I encourage you to go out to W3 Schools and also read this in your textbook. It'll talk more about, there's other superglobals, but right now we're just going to be talking about two, and they are post and get. And again, post is the one that we are probably going to be using most frequently. I'm going to go over the other just so that you are exposed to it as well. A superglobal is always, it starts with a $, and it has an underscore, and then the word that it is used is all in caps. This is how we can recognize a superglobal. And in this case, it's post. And what this does is it relates to when we use method equals post in our HTML file. It collects that data and recognizes that, oh, this says post. And then what it does is it passes the variables, and those variables are the things that we fill out in the field. And we're going to get more into how we do that momentarily. And so the example of what we would see in our HTML file is that form action, and we go to our PHP file, method equals post. So that's the first part that indicates that this one's going to be using the post superglobal. Then on the PHP side of things, you see this command that has the $, the underscore, and the word post in all capital letters, and then it has the name of element that it's pulling from, in our case, the form. And like I say, I'm going to go over this in just a moment, so I just want you to see what this looks like, and then we'll go into more detail. Get, on the other hand, is a little bit more confusing to understand until you get further into PHP, which is going to be beyond the scope of this class. It's another way of collecting information from forms. So again, you might see, just like we had method equals post in the prior example, we would have in our form, we would say method equals get. But what it's doing is it's getting data sent in the URL. If you ever go to the top of, say, Amazon and look at the address bar when you're doing a search, and you're going to see something that'll have the URL name, so it'll have like Amazon.com, it might have a few forward slashes to get you into the right directory. It's going to have a question mark. And then after that, it's going to have some sort of word, or in the case of Amazon, some characters. Then you're going to see an ampersand, because that's going to join it with something else. And then you're going to see some more, either letters or a word. And you're going to keep seeing these strings being connected together by the and symbol. And those are the pieces that are actually getting passed along as the variables in this case. What this is doing is it's giving us the addresses basically within the URL bar at the top of our website. What happens then is in the PHP side is it's going to say, in this particular case, it would say study and then subject equals PHP. So it would be study get PHP at get W3 Schools. Now, one of the things that I have always been cautioned about is that get can come with some security risks because everything is exposed in the URL. I can guarantee you with sites like Amazon that security measures have been taken, and this is really, it's a good way because you can see the URL. If you don't know what you're doing, this can open things up to security risks. So it's another reason I recommend to use post, because it hides everything from the viewer. Let's take a look at what our confirmation page would look like that would go with the HTML form we saw at the beginning. If you recall, that one used post method, and this would be our welcome.php. In a moment, I'm going to just take you out and we're going to look at some actual code and how this works. This is when we're going to go into more detail of how it's pulling this information. And so in this case, what we're saying is welcome, and we open up some PHP, and then we say, hey, display, using echo, the superglobal called post, and pull the name out of the name field. And then your email address is, then we open up PHP again, and we say to look for email. Now let's go look at the code and see what exactly this is doing. Okay, here I am with the basic HTML form. And I do encourage you to go ahead and create this. And what we're doing is we're saying, here's our form, use the action welcome.php, which we'll create in a moment, and method is post. And remember, this is what we're going to use the vast majority of the time. This is just like the example that I showed in the earlier part of the video, right at the beginning. So we have name, we have the input is type. This is going to generate our field, and that the name we're going to use is called name, and email, input type is also text, and it's called email. And then we're going to do our input. I just added some because I wanted it to actually say value equals submit form, so that when you look at the form, it's actually going to say submit form. Then our name and submit here. And that's it. That's our form. It's really super simple. Okay, we can take a look at this form. So I'm going to just go and open up my file. And that's all that is to it. But remember, I said we can't do anything. So I could type my name, if I can type it correctly, and an email address, and hit submit. And it's not going to do anything. In this case, it did bring up what the PHP file, it's going to the PHP file, but because this is on my local computer and not on a web server that has that PHP interpreter, all it does, you can see in the address bar, it says welcome.php, it just shows me the code. So it's not doing anything. So when we actually need to make sure that this form works, we will be going out to our web server and getting our files up there. Let's go back into our code. Let's go and create that PHP. And I'm using Text Wrangler at the moment, but you can use Dreamweaver. That's fine. If you're using Dreamweaver, just make sure that you go in and do File, New, and that you select PHP as the document type. So I'm just going to go in and open up my text document. And with Text Wrangler, I don't get any of that first HTML stuff. So what I'm going to do is go into my basic form, and I'm just going to copy some of this over so that it's there so you don't have to sit here and watch me type. And so that I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and save this right away as my PHP file. So I'm going to do a file save as, and this is welcome. And remember, this needs to be a PHP file because we're going to be doing PHP that parses this. So we're going to go in here, go welcome.php. So now I just have the basics of my form. I'm going to go ahead and update my title because remember, this will parse as HTML when the viewer sees it. And I'm just going to say thank you because this is what we're in essence going to be doing. So what we need to do, and I'm going to do this, remember in the very first video that we watched last week in working with variables, I'm going to actually open up my PHP within this, within the HTML for each instance that I need it. The other would be you can work within the PHP for the entire document. Either one works. So in this case, I'm just going to say simply welcome, and now I'm going to open up my PHP. Oops, I can't type today. And I'm going to close my PHP just so I remember to do that. Now we're going to work in between this. First thing we need to do is echo because we're going to be displaying what we want on the screen. We need to grab that variable from the form that somebody filled out for us. I'm going to go echo space, and this is where I'm going to use that Superglobal. So $_post, because if you remember, we're going to go pop back to it. I said method is post, so that's why we're going to use that. So method post, and then we use some square brackets. So I'm just going to open and close them right now. But what goes in these square brackets, so right in here, comes from our form. So let's go back to this form. And remember when I said in the earlier part of this video that this part is really important. We have name, and that's just an HTML attribute, equals name. Name is what's telling us what's going to go in this field, and so it's related to the input type. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to put in my quotations, name. If you spelled it in all lowercase in the HTML form, it needs to be in all lowercase on the PHP form. And in fact, you know what? Let me open these in two windows so we can actually see them side by side. All right, so there we have our form on the left, and now what we're doing is matching. So here is name to match name. And just like any PHP command, we need to put our semicolon at the end of this. And I'm just going to close up this gap a little bit. So now what we're saying right here is echo Superglobal, which means it's going to recognize this post and it's going to grab whatever somebody entered in the name field over here because they match. So that's closed out, and then I'm just going to put a little line break right there. We're going to go to our second line, and in that, I'm going to say your email address is, colon. We're going to open up our PHP again, because remember I said I'm going to embed this within my HTML. And we need to echo again, just like right up above. And you guessed it, we're going to use that Superglobal again, so $_post and the square brackets. And take a minute to think about what's the other field. What do we need to put in here and where do we get it? If you guessed email, because it's whatever's associated with this name attribute is email, then you guessed correctly. So let's go put that in there, make sure it's in quotes, make sure it's all spelled exactly the same. It is case sensitive, so be very hyper aware of that. And then we're going to close it with a semicolon and we're going to close our PHP. That is all we need to put in here. So now I'm going to put this welcome PHP and this basic form.html up on my web server, because remember, it can't parse this on my local computer. Okay, so here I am out at FileZilla. I've already found my location on the left. Yes, I have a bunch of other files from my earlier testing and working on things to get ready for this class. What I need to move over is that basic form, HTML. Remember, that's this. I'm going to move this. In my case, I happen to have a folder here called ICT. I created a folder within that called Class 7. When you are working on the exercises for this class, please follow the instructions that I give you there, but I encourage you to work with this one as well. So just kind of, create your folder that's appropriate and put the files within it. So I'm going to move this over. So I'm going to upload. I need to go find the one that's called welcome.php, and I'm going to upload that one as well. Because remember, that's the one that's going to actually generate that confirmation page after you get the email filled out. So let's go out to our browser and take a look. So this was the one where I was locally. Now I need to go out to my space. Okay, so now I'm here. I'm at my web space out on Stout Martech, and I navigated out to the correct folder and files. So here I am out at my basic form. And if you remember, when it was local, I could type it and it wouldn't do anything. It just pulled up the actual PHP page and just showed me the code. But now, because I'm on a web server and that web server actually has the PHP interpreter installed, if I type this in and type in an email address, even if it's pretend, and click submit form, now it's going to say, welcome, Chris. Your email address is, and there's my email address. Let's shrink this just a little bit and look at our files. We're going to kind of get all of these out here. All right, so here's what we're seeing on the screen is welcome, and there's my PHP that says to go get name, which is this. And if you recall, let's go back. It's what I plugged into the form. Likewise, my email address is from right here where it says your email address is, and then we opened up the PHP again and said get from the post, the one that has the name attribute of email. So this one, and then it displays it. That is one of the cool things that you're going to discover of many in working with forms. And so this is what we're going to do. And then after you finish watching this video, this is it for this video. Go ahead and move on to the forms exercise, and you're ready to complete that and the lab for the week. So there, just like last week, there is going to be a total of officially 2 forms, but there's exercises for each of the things that we covered this week. So you're going to have exercises for conditionals, exercises for the loops, and exercises for the forms, and then you're going to have the actual lab that combines these elements. So thank you and good luck.